Hey crew, it's Bit, and I'm back with another Bible study. Today we're going to be doing a brand new chapter, or a brand new book, and this is a short one. There's only 4 chapters. We're going to get through the whole thing today, so it's not even really going to get its own playlist or anything. But before we begin, I hold a very unconventional Bible study because I hold some very unconventional beliefs. I don't believe that there was a chosen people or that there was a necessary death for redemption ever at any point in history. So I tend to step on people's toes. If you're unaware with what I am doing here, you should definitely start in Genesis because this is one of those stories today that people hold dear. Ruth and Boaz is one of those stories that people break out almost every year in a sermon. And we're probably not going to look at it in the same way that you're used to. So, if you're happy with where you are in your relationship with God, this is probably not the story for you. This is not the Bible study for you. You're just reading the book without any glasses on, and it might hurt your feelings. With that being said, everybody who's still here, we are in Ruth. We're going to talk about Ruth today. And this is an interesting one, so you might want to stick around. First, we're going to talk about Naomi. Now, we don't know a whole lot about her. Her name means beauty, right? But other than that, we don't know a whole lot about her except what's described in the book. So let's go through the text. And in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. And a certain man from Bethlehem in Judah, with his wife and 2 sons, went to reside in the land of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife's name was Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah, and they entered the land of Moab and settled there. Now, I'm not going to pull up the geography, but that is going from Israel into the land of Moab. Moab is to the south and to the east of the Negev. And then Naomi's husband Elimelech died, and she was left with her 2 sons, who took Moabite women as their wives, one named Orpah and the other named Ruth. And after they had lived in Moab about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and without her husband. And when Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had attended to his people by providing them with food, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to leave the land of Moab. Accompanied by her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road leading back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home, and may the Lord show you loving devotion, as you have shown to your dead and to me. And may the Lord enable each of you to find rest in the home of your new husband." Now, 10 years is not an insignificant amount of time if you're unaware, but they were married. They were married women for 10 years, and they were both barren. Neither one of them had children. And she's like, well, just go home to your mom, because she can't provide for them. She can't provide for herself, right? She's having to leave the land of Moab because there is no one to provide for her, and it's a patriarchal society, and so it falls upon the nearest kinsman to take charge, right? And to make sure the provision is provided. And so she's like, y'all go home to your families, and maybe they can do something for you. Maybe they can help you find a better situation than I can, because I don't have anything going on. And she kissed them as they wept aloud and said, "Surely we will return to you to your people." Oh wait, go back to your mother's home, and may the Lord show you loving devotion. May the Lord enable each of you to find rest in the home of your new husband. And she kissed them as they wept aloud and said, "Surely we will return with you to your people." But Naomi replied, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you go with me? Are there still sons in my womb to become your husband? Return home, my daughters. Go on, for I am too old to have another husband, even if I thought there was hope for me to have a husband tonight and to bear sons. Would you wait for them to grow up? Would you refrain from having husbands? No, my daughters, it grieves me very much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." And again they wept aloud, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. Follow her back home." But Ruth replied, "Do not urge me to leave you or to turn from following you. For wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me, and ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me." And when Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped trying to persuade her. We're going to enter into the land of speculation here, right? Orpah was reluctant to go, but she went. But Ruth, like, nah, I ain't going back over there. And bearing in mind the circumstances of the times, right? It was not a good time for a woman to be alive, period. It is much better today than it was then. And you can make your arguments for and against how good it is now. But back then, it was a pretty terrible thing. Women were literally property. And even today, women are not always in the best of circumstances. Like, people underestimate how much men are also not in the best of circumstances, but almost everybody knows that women very often are not in the best of circumstances. When they're children, they're very likely to be sexually and physically abused. A very likelihood of that to happen by someone in the family. There is a very good chance that Ruth was determined not to go back because of that. And that's fine. That is perfectly okay, right? She met a mother-in-law who actually gave a shit about her. That may have been the first time in her life that she actually seen kindness or whatever. And we're firmly into speculation. None of this is in the text. This is just me trying to extrapolate the reasoning, because it does not make sense. Like, yes, she's nice. And for me, it would be an easy decision too, because, I mean, I'm a guy, so it's a whole different situation. But if it was me with my wife's family, that's my family now too. And they're more so than like my extended family that I never see, right? So like if my brothers and sisters are one thing, but my brothers and sisters-in-law are in the same equality there. And like, if you didn't have a good mother and now you have a good mother-in-law, then it would make sense that you would stick with your mother-in-law. And that's all I'm really trying to say there, is to try and personify this because it's important to note that these are real people that we're talking about, supposedly, right? Now, it may just be a complete figment of people's imagination. I don't think so. I think this is an amalgamation of stories, and that those stories did come from somewhere. And so I like to try and root it in the people. But it's also important to note that the bloodline that is supposedly the chosen one here, it's passed along by the mother. Like, that's how you are of that particular whatever. It's just like with the Native Americans here and the indigenous peoples of North America. Like, not all of them, but a great many of them, your bloodline is only confirmed if it is your matriarchal line that holds the blood, right? Like, my dad's mom was part, and so he was part of the bloodline, but because it was him and my mom has none, and I am not, even though I do hold some of the blood. And so it's important to know that, because Ruth is a Moabite. She is not an Israelite. She can convert to Judaism, but she's not by blood an Israelite. And the Israelite is passed along by bloodlines. That'll be important later. And so Naomi and Ruth traveled until they came to Bethlehem, and when they entered Bethlehem, the whole city was stirred up because of them. And the women of the city exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" Do not call me Naomi, because Naomi means pleasant, right? And she replied, "Call me Mara." And Mara means bitter, because the Almighty has dealt quite bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? After all, the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has afflicted me. So Naomi returned from the land of Moab with her daughter-in-law Ruth, the Moabitess, and they arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Now, Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a prominent man of noble character from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth, The Moabitess said to Naomi, please let me go out into the fields and glean the heads of grain after someone in whose sight I might find favor. Now, it's a little unclear where she would expect to find the favor, because the gleaning process is the harvesters go through, and remember how they told us back in the laws that you're not supposed to harvest twice, like leave some for the unfortunate and for the nature, and that's what it is. And what she's asking to do here is to go into the fields and to gather extra. And it's a little bit weird that it's like, and find favor, because while it is an accepted practice, that is something that you do, how are you going to find favor with someone by picking through their field and getting the grain that they missed? And so Ruth departed, or she says, go ahead, my daughter. And says, so Ruth departed and went out into the field and gleaned after the harvesters. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. Just then Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and said to the harvesters, the Lord be with you. The Lord bless you, they replied. And Boaz asked the foreman of his harvesters, whose young woman is this? And the foreman answered, she is the Moabitess who returned with Naomi from the lands of Moab. And she has said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the harvesters. So she came out and has continued from morning until now, except that she rested a short time in the shelter. And then Boaz said to Ruth, listen, my daughter, do not go and glean in another field, and do not go away from this place, but stay here close to my servant girls. Let your eyes be on the field they are harvesting, and follow along after these girls. Indeed, I have ordered the young men not to touch you. And then when you are thirsty, go and drink from the jars the young men have filled. At this she fell on her face, bowing low to the ground, and said to him, why have I found such favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me, even though I am a foreigner? And Boaz replied, I have been made fully aware of all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, and how you left your father and mother and the land of your birth, and how you came to a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay your work, and may you receive a rich reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have taken refuge. So she definitely found favor in his sight, right? He is definitely going to reward her meticulousness, right? She is going through and she has gathered so well from what the harvesters have left that it brought notice upon herself. That's what happened. And so he decides then that after he hears that she is Naomi's daughter-in-law, right? Then he's like, okay, well, I'm going to employ her. And so it's important to note that the entire town noticed that Naomi showed up, right? It caused quite a stir that Naomi showed up. And it's important to notice that nobody stepped up. There was no kinsman who stepped up to take control of the situation, as should have been done according to the laws. Somebody should have already stepped up without Ruth having to go out into the fields and gather notice. But now that he has noticed his kinsman, he's like, okay, well, I'm going to pay you to work. But it's also interesting to note that he has to give special instructions to the Israelites there not to molest this woman, not to harass her. And she fell on her face, bowing low, and said, why have I found such favor in your eyes? And he says, I've been made aware of what you've done. May you receive a rich reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have taken refuge. My Lord, may I continue to find favor in your eyes, for you have comforted and spoken kindly to your maidservant, though I am not like one of your servant girls. At mealtime, Boaz said to her, come over here and have some bread and dip it in the vinegar sauce. So she sat down beside the harvesters, and he offered her roasted grain, and she ate, and was satisfied, and had some left over. And when Ruth got up to glean, Boaz ordered his young men, even if she gathers among the sheaves, do not insult her. Rather, pull out for her some stalks from the bundles, and leave them for her to gather. Do not rebuke her. And so he's got a crush. And so Ruth gathered grain in the field until evening, and when she beat it out, what she had gleaned, it was about an ephah of barley. And she picked up the grain and went into town, where her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, and she brought out what she had saved from her meal, and gave it to Naomi. And then her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you glean today? And where did you work? Blessed be the man who noticed you." And so she told her mother-in-law where she had worked. The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz, she said. And then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed by the Lord, who has not withdrawn his kindness from the living or the dead." Naomi, this man is a close relative. He is one of our kinsman redeemers. Awesome. He should have already stepped up then. And then Ruth, the Moabitess, said, "He also told me, stay with my young men until they have finished gathering all my harvest." And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law Ruth, "My daughter, it is good for you to work with his young women, so that nothing will happen to you in another field. Stay with my young men until they have finished, and it's good for you to work with his young women." Maybe he's talking about stay here where the men are guards, right? And so Ruth stayed close to the servant girls of Boaz to glean grain until the barley and wheat harvests were finished, and she lived with her mother-in-law. And one day Ruth's mother-in-law Naomi said to her, "My daughter, should I not seek a resting place for you, that it may be well with you?" Now, is not Boaz, with whose servant girls you have been working, a relative of ours? In fact, tonight he is winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Therefore, wash yourself, put on perfume, wear your best clothes. Go down to the threshing floor, but do not let the man know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. And when he lies down, note the place where he lies. And then go in, uncover his feet, and lie down. And he will explain to you what you should do. Here's your one chance, fancy, don't let it down. "I will do everything you say," Ruth answered. And so she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law had instructed her to do. And after Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. And then Ruth went in secretly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. And at midnight Boaz was startled, turned over, and lying there at his feet was a woman. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am your servant Ruth," she replied. "Spread the corner of your garment over me, for you are a kinsman redeemer." And then Boaz says, "May the Lord bless you, my daughter. You have shown more kindness now than before." Do you think she showed more kindness than before? "Because you have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, do not be afraid, my daughter. I will do for you whatever you request, since all of my fellow townspeople know that you are a woman of noble character. Yes, it is true that I am a kinsman redeemer, but there is a redeemer nearer than I. Stay here tonight, and in the morning, if he wants to redeem you, good. Let him redeem you. But if he does not want to redeem you, as surely as the Lord lives, I will. Now, lay here until morning." And she lay at his feet until morning, but she got up before anyone else could recognize her. And then Boaz said, "Do not let it be known that a woman came to the threshing floor." And he told her, "Bring the shawl you are wearing and hold it out." And when she did so, he shoveled 6 measures of barley into her shawl. And then he went into the city. And when Ruth returned to her mother-in-law Naomi, asked her, said, "How did it go, my daughter?" And then Ruth told her all that Boaz had done for her. And she said, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, for he said, 'Do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" "Wait, my daughter," said Naomi, "until you find out how things go, for he will not rest until he has resolved the matter today." Well, looky there. He got a little bit of motivation in the middle of the night when she came after he was drunk and passed out and snuck into his bed. He got a little bit of motivation to go and get some things done that he should have already been taken care of. He should have already, as was his duty, been the kinsman redeemer for Naomi. It should have already happened, but he was not doing his diligence. He wasn't that concerned about it. But he got some motivation in the middle of the night. I bet it was fun, too. I bet he had a good time. What you think? You think he had a good time? He was already in a good mood. He had just harvested all this stuff, and she helped. She made it possible that more was harvested than what he was expecting. And then he gets a little bit tipsy, has a little bit of food, goes to sleep, don't think nothing of it. And this old ass wakes up, and he's got this little hot young thing under the bed with him. He's like, "What's up?" All right, we'll see what we can do. Let's see what he gets done now. Y'all ready for chapter 4? Let's do chapter 4. Boaz redeems Ruth. And meanwhile, Boaz went to the gate, and he sat on down at the gate. And soon the kinsman redeemer, of whom he had spoken, came along, and Boaz says, "Hey, come here, come here, come here. Come here and sit down." And so he went over and he sat down, and Boaz took 10 elders of the city and said, "Sit." And so they did. And he said to the kinsman redeemer, "Naomi, who has returned from the land of Moab, is selling that piece of land that belonged to our brother Elimelech. And I thought I should inform you that you may buy it back in the presence of those seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you want to redeem it, do so. But if you will not redeem it, tell me so that I may know, because there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am next after you." "I'll redeem it," he replied. And Boaz said, "On the day you buy the land from Naomi, and also from Ruth the Moabitess, you must also acquire the widow of the deceased, in order to raise up the name of the deceased in his inheritance." And the kinsman redeemer replied, "I can't redeem it myself, or I would jeopardize my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption, because I cannot redeem it." So he was okay with taking the land, but he didn't want to take Naomi, and much less her foreign daughter-in-law. Now, in former times in Israel, concerning the redemption or exchange of property, to make any matter legally binding, a man would remove his sandal and give it to the other party. And this was confirmation in Israel. So the kinsman redeemer removed his sandal and said to Boaz, "Buy it yourself." At this, Boaz said to the elders and all the people, "You are witnesses today that I am buying from Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. Moreover, I have required Ruth, the Moabitess, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, to raise up the name of the deceased through his inheritance, so that his name will not disappear from among his brothers, or from the gate of his home. You are witnesses today." "We are witnesses," said the elder and all the people at the gate. "And may the Lord make the woman entering your home like Rachel and Leah." That's an interesting tune. Who together built up the house of Israel. "May you be prosperous in Ephrathah and famous in Bethlehem. And may your house become like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring the Lord would give you by this young woman." That's an interesting blessing, and it's interesting to notice Rachel and Leah. We've done studies on that already, so we're not going to dive back into that manipulation of genetics that possibly happened there. But now it's going to get interesting, because Boaz marries Ruth. And so Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and when he had relations with her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. And then the woman said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a kinsman redeemer, and may his name become famous in Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." And Naomi took the child and placed him on her lap and became the nurse to him. And neighbor women said, "A son has been born to Naomi," and they named him Obed. And he became father to Jesse, the father of David. There are several instances, and we've already been through a couple, of barren suddenly giving birth and new bloodlines being introduced. It is important to note, like why I noted it earlier, it is important to note that the bloodline of Israel, like in order to be Jewish, your mother had to be Jewish. Like, that's how it works. Now, the property is passed down along the patriarchal lines, but in order to be Jewish, the mom has to be Jewish, even today. You can convert to Judaism, but you're not an Israelite, right? If your bloodline doesn't come through the matriarchal line of the Jews, you are not Jewish. And so, here we got Obed, who becomes the father of Jesse, who becomes the father of David. These are the generations of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron was the father of Ram. Ram was the father of Amminadab. Amminadab was the father of Nahshon. Nahshon was the father of Salmon. Salmon was the father of Boaz. Boaz was the father of Obed. Obed was the father of Jesse. And Jesse was the father of David. Okay, so there is a good bit here, right? We've already talked about the fact that women were property, right? And so, through deception, this woman manages to become the property and therefore redeem herself. And it is sold to us in the church as though she was this super faithful person. And if you look at the story, superficially, I can see how you can take that from it, but this was a woman who was desperate. She did not want to go home, right? Obviously, it would have been better if circumstances were not dire. It would have been better for her to return to her mother's house. You notice they said her mother's house too. And so it would have been important for her to return to her mother's house if that was a possibility. There's all kinds of reasons why that may not have been a possibility. And we explored what I think, but there's a lot of reasons. And so she goes back and she's poor. They're destitute. They don't have any money. They don't have any food. And she's like, all right, well, I'm going to go. The custom of the land is to leave some for the poor. So I'm going to go and I'm going to pick up every bit I can. And she does. And she does it so well that she gets noticed by this guy who already should have taken care of the problem. But he didn't. And then when he sees her, he offers her employment, but he doesn't offer to be the kinsman redeemer for Naomi. It isn't until he is sexually advanced upon it. Whether or not that was a consummation or not, I'll leave up to your imagination, but I imagine it most likely was. I said I was going to leave it up to your imagination, but I didn't, did I? And so, it most likely was a consummation of something. And he got up the next day and took care of business. Once she put it on him, he was fine. And he was willing to do what he needed to do. But that's not faithful service to God. Don't call it that. That is no reason for his name to be famous throughout all of Israel. Don't call it that. Now, you can make your arguments for David, and they're just setting the line for David down the road. But I don't hold the line that David had to be, right? David did what he did, and I ain't taking that away. We will deal with that as we get to it, and that's coming very soon. But I don't automatically apologize for the improper actions with the thought that there is a redemption arc coming. Right? We haven't done that for any of the people who were the patriarchs. We haven't done that for Moses and the people coming through. And I'm not going to do that for Boaz. Boaz was not a faithful servant to his God. If he was, then the widow would have been provided for straight out the gate. How many times were we told to provide for the widows and the orphan children? How many times? And that was his job specifically. He was second in line to make sure that shit got done. He was second in line in charge of that. It was his job to make sure they were provided for. And he had to be tricked into it. Yeah, he was going to let her work when it benefited him. But when she snuck in and put that on him, then all of a sudden, you know what? Let's make this happen. And it happened. And I'm not taking away from the fact that it happened. But it was not some pure, well, he's a good guy. Everybody should talk good about him. That's not what happened. And then she's the sneaky linking in, right? She's the one, she ain't got the meat, but she's sneaking in for the link. And she's doing it when he's drunk and passed out. Now, people like to underestimate the fact that men can get raped too. That is a thing. I can promise you that because I've been in that situation specifically right there. Drunk and passed out and woke up in the middle of some stuff I had no clue was about to happen. And so I can tell you that it can happen to men. And what he did was what most men would do in that situation if they were, in that time period for sure. Okay, well, you want to put it on me, I'll take it. But that doesn't make it right in the slightest bit that you went in, even if you didn't have Congress, if y'all didn't have relations, you put him in doubt enough that he was like, all right, we're going to take care of this today. And then he tells everybody, don't let nobody know she was here. That's not some above board type shit happening. That's some sneaky link, right? That's some dirty back road, like behind the scenes type of stuff. And that's not an honorable way to start a marriage. And the pastor will stand up in front of you and use Ruth as an example of how to be a good wife to women, and women eat it up. Well, if you are just, and men eat it up too, but women eat it up, that if you were just diligent enough to clean up and make yourself useful, then maybe you will be worthy of this man doing the thing. Well, here's the thing. You are worthy regardless of what you bring to the table. God made you for a purpose. God made you perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. Now, that does not mean that you don't have room for growth, and that does not mean that there are not things to change about yourself. It means that you are fully able of doing it all by yourself. You should not be seeking a partner to take care of you. And this was different times, right? The times of Ruth was very different than today. But even today, you should not be defining your worth by what you provide to someone else. And you should not be defining someone else's worth by what they provide to you. Now, on a certain extent, there is a value exchange, right? We should all be positively impacting each other's life in a value exchange type of way. I build you up, you build me up. That's what we should be doing, but it is not supposed to be a transactional thing. If I do this for you, then you are required to do this for me. It's not a thing. It shouldn't be a thing. This whole situation was done so shady that there really is no redemption for it. Like, you can make apologies for the time, but that doesn't mean it was right even in the time. Just because it was normal doesn't mean it was right. Slavery was normal. That doesn't mean it was right. Assault was common. That does not make it right. Murder and conquest, perfectly normal, does not make it right. For them to hold him up as an example because he got tricked into something, right? That's not an example. It's a story. There's value to be pulled out of this. Value about working hard, and value about, like, she was being noticed regardless, and she took the extra step of to uncover his feet. Find your value in you and God, in that relationship, and then all the other people will come in when they need to. The person that is supposed to be in your life can't show up in your life until that you are ready for them. And if you are still chasing the wrong things, or you are doing the wrong things, then the person that you want cannot show up in your life. You cannot get true love through deceit. I accidentally stopped that. Sorry about the drum cut. I meant to do that. And so, don't try to define yourself by the service you provide for others. You should provide service for others. You should be building up others, but that is not your value. Your value is intrinsic in your spirit. It is intrinsic in your soul. It is intrinsic in your journey. But it is not in the value that you bring to someone else. It is not in gleaning after the harvestings. It is not in turning up the feet, uncovering the feet. It's not what you provide that makes you a good wife. It is the solidity that makes you a good wife. It is the willingness to be in a partnership that makes you a good husband. That's where I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up, because there's a whole lot more I could say about this, but I don't know that it would even get through. Like, I've already stepped on plenty of toes with this, because they really do like to hammer in that this is the kind of devotion that you should have. And it's like, really? That's what you want for your daughter? I don't at all. And so Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult topic. I know that I hold some unconventional beliefs and that I tend to step on toes, and I want you to know it is not intentional, but I am not sorry. I mean, the things that I say are the things that I am being told to say, because when I read this, they scream out at me, this is not right. She went and tricked this man into a marriage, and it is held up as an example in the church for starting a marriage. That's insane to me. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. God loves you, and this has been Fit State. Peace.